Hello everyone, this is Monster Tamer Bloba, coming at you with another Kindred Fates guide. This time, we're going to be talking about everybody's favorite Earth type here, Shovlet. To get things started, we're going to be taking a look at his moves. I have Quicksand here from the Discord, who's graciously volunteered to be my training dummy for this video. Here we have his basic attack, Earth Swipes. They deal Earth melee damage to a single target, and you can do them up to 3 times in quick succession. One thing to keep in mind with this attack is it's very slow. It can lock you in animation, giving your opponent a free and easy attack on you. As such, I only recommend doing this in trades with other Shovlets or when you have your opponent stuck in Quicksand. Up next, we have Bite. Bite deals heavy damage and staggers the target. With a quick cooldown, good damage, and range for a melee attack. This power can be quite nice for some extra damage with Shovlet when he does not have many other options for damage, especially not up close. It's much easier to use than your basic attack, so you don't need to be as careful with this one. Once again, it has a very good combo for Quicksand, as it will be hard for your opponent to get away. And then, last but not least, we have my favorite move, Dig. As you see, Dig allows you to tunnel underground, making the user untargetable for up to 5 seconds. When you emerge, you deal damage to any character you collide with and stun them for 2 seconds. You can also re-emerge early, but it seems that you don't tend to get the stun along with the damage if you decide to re-emerge early. You can use this ability to tunnel under obstacles, as you're seeing here. So there are many ways you could use this ability. As a defensive power, you can avoid pretty much any incoming attacks, and if you time it right, you can even dodge almost any attack your opponent could ever throw at you. You'd also close the distance with your opponent through an offensive way, and then quickly switch Kinfolk for a surprise attack. Now, we move on to the buff moves. You see here, we have buff moves like Fortify and Meditate. Fortify raises the user's physical defense, which is the red move that you saw, where the blue version is Meditate. That raises your special defense. Fortify raises your physical defense. The way you use them will be the same. The only thing that changes is when you use them, which will be based on what Kinfolk your opponent is using. For example, if you're using something like Ember, you might prefer to use this Meditate. Or if they're using something like a Slifer, you can use Fortify. One thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have some distance between you and your opponent so that you can get your cover, so that you don't get hit while you're charging this up by your opponent, or else it'll cancel your attack. Dig can help with this, as you saw how quickly it moves, how it can get you away from cover. You can also try to keep them trapped in Quicksand and take cover and buff. It takes about 3 seconds to buff, and anytime you change Kinfolks, your buffs will go away, so that's something else to keep in mind. These buffs can stack up to 6 stages. As you see, I can do them an unlimited number of times, but each one gives me 2 stages, and after the 6th stage, so 3 applications, they will have no further effect. Next up, we have Quicksand, which is most likely a must-have on any build of Shovlet, in my opinion. Quicksand summons a circle of quicksand that slows and damages multiple targets in the area. This is useful for keeping enemies in place for your own attacks, combo attacks for switching to other Kinfolk, and getting away when you're in trouble. It can even slow down a Shovlet that's using Dig. While it's not a ton of damage, it can be used to finish off a running Kinfolk as well. It can also be made to be used defensively by hiding in the middle of it, making it harder for melee-focused Kinfolk like Slifer to do anything to you. Speaking of defensive moves, next we have Rest. For this, you'll want to be behind a wall similar to this, with your opponents decently far away. It gives you the sleep status for 10 seconds and restores 50% of your health, as well as curing you as all status effects like burn and poison. Like a buff, you'll need a safe place to pull it off as it takes 3 seconds to use and your opponent can stop you in mid-cast. It has a very high cooldown as well, so if you do get stopped, you will likely not get another chance to use it if you're at low health. The sleep for 10 seconds is a heavy price to pay for this power, so I highly recommend using coffee bean item with it to wake yourself up from sleep as soon as your cast gets done. But now, we have Shovlet's only debuff move so far. That would be Roar. It lowers the target's physical and special attack by 1 stage. Once again, this power goes very well with Quicksand. You might be noticing a trend here, as it makes it hard for the target to dodge and get away. Other than that, using this power right after Dig could possibly give you the drop on your opponent as well. I don't recommend just running after opponent and trying to hit them with this power, because as you can see, Shovlet's speed is fairly low and they'll likely outrun you. The range is fairly generous, but even so, it's better to play it safe than sorry and use Quicksand. Next up, we have one thing that Shovlet can use fairly effectively if comboed once again with Quicksand. It's Rock Slide. Cause a Rock Slide in the area that all enemies hit with this attack will take damage and get slowed. As the damage is a little random with this one, but an opponent is likely to dodge right out of it if you don't have something holding them in place, like a Quicksand. I do find it that if you get them with low stamina, or some other slow besides Quicksand, like a Wither, you can get much better results. The best I've seen is about taking 75% HP away from an opponent at once, with the worst is I've seen literally no damage at all at one point. So this is good for zoning, like if I wanted to stop this Ember from running over here, I could do something like that, and they would likely avoid it just for the risk, but it's a real throw of the dice for how much damage it'll do, as you've seen casting it repetitively on this Ember. Now that we're done with damage, it's time to move on to some general tips. The number one thing I would like to point out is that Shovlet is very slow. You need to make sure to play around this and make good use of Dig and Quicksand, or you have to read your opponent's moves very carefully and quickly, knowing the right time to dodge is. So Shovlet's strengths, he's very tanky, and so you don't have to worry about taking a couple of hits here and there, especially if it's from more of a basic attack, because it's not super hard to recover from them so long as you have rest or potentially rations, depending on what build you're running. And this can also let you get away with trading some hits that would have been much more brutal for most of the Kinfolk. Now moving on to the useful items. This segment was recommended to me by Quicksand from the Discord, so thank you so much for that. If you plan on using rest, I would say Coffee Bean is a must-have item on your Shovlet. This is also the added benefit of stopping a Kadoki from putting you to sleep if you happen to come up against one. If you decide not to use rest, then Rations is another great alternative. This combined with Shovlet's survivability, Rations give you a really great staying power. And finally, we come to the matchups for Shovlet, the best and the worst. I think the worst matchup for Shovlet at this time is probably Ember. And when I say worst, I don't mean Shovlet is not good versus Ember, just that Ember stands the best chance versus Shovlet. Shovlet right now is a very high tier Kinfolk and doesn't have a lot of hard counters at the moment. The reason that Ember occupies this space as Shovlet's worst matchup, quote unquote, is thanks to a well-timed Scorch or Explosion can put a unprepared Shovlet off guard when they pop out of a dig and give the Ember a distinct advantage. But if you play carefully, you can avoid this minor weakness. And as for the best matchup, I'd have to say it would probably be Slifer. Once again, not by a huge margin. This mostly stems from Shovlet's use of Quicksand, making it hard for Slifer to do good damage without being willing to hop into the Quicksand and take some damage himself. As I'm sure you've started to realize, Shovlet is a fairly midline as far as his power goes. He's not going to crush, but you're not going to crush him. He's really balanced in that way. He might be hard to counter, but he also doesn't particularly counter anyone super well. So that's just something to keep in mind with Shovlet, is that he's going to be a tanky character like that. But I think that's about covers what I wanted to say about Shovlet. Please leave a comment if you have any questions or tips of your own to leave. And this has been once Tamer Bloba, signing off. Thank you all for checking out my guide. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Goodbye, and God bless.